Zoe Carter had never considered herself a hero, yet that evening she found herself holding a mop and wiping a spill in a quiet, dimly lit office, smiling at the sight of an older woman struggling to balance a bucket and rag. Most people passed by without a glance, focused on their deadlines, but something about this woman tugged at Zoe's heart. Maybe it was the tired slump of her shoulders or the subtle frustration in her hands. Zoe couldn't walk away, not this time. "Here, let me help you," she said, stepping forward. The woman glanced up, startled, her eyes meeting Zoe's with a mix of suspicion and gratitude. "I can manage," she whispered softly, her accent carrying an unfamiliar melody. But Zoe insisted, adjusting the bucket so it wouldn't tip, showing a patience she didn't often practice with strangers. Minutes passed as they worked together in quiet companionship. Zoe felt a warmth she hadn't expected, a strange sense of purpose in helping someone who had no idea how much it mattered. The woman's hands shook slightly, and Zoe gently guided her, steadying the rag in her grasp. Finally, the woman sighed, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Thank you," she said simply. "You have a good heart." Zoe shrugged, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Anyone would help if they could," she replied modestly, though inside a small pride stirred. She didn't ask for payment, she didn't need it. Some kindnesses were their own reward. Unbeknownst to Zoe, she had caught the attention of someone else entirely. Min-jae Kim, the company's enigmatic Korean executive, had watched the interaction from a distance. His sharp eyes, usually reserved and unreadable, softened as he observed Zoe's ease with genuine care. It wasn't often someone moved him, but something about the way she handled herself, her warmth, her attentiveness, piqued his curiosity. That night, Zoe left the office lighter than she had arrived, unaware that a small act of compassion had already set events into motion that would forever alter her life. Across the room, Min-jae lingered, silently noting the woman's grace, promising himself that he would learn more about the girl who had unknowingly captured his attention. Sometimes, the simplest choices ripple far beyond what we can see, and Zoe's heart, generous and unassuming, had just begun a story much larger than she could imagine. Zoe had never expected her ordinary day at the office to take such an unexpected turn. She was filing documents when a quiet voice called her name. "Zoe Carter?" Looking up, she saw him, Min-jae Kim. His dark eyes were unreadable, but there was a faint hint of curiosity in their depth. He held a folder, his posture precise, almost intimidating, yet there was something oddly inviting about him. "Mr. Kim," she said politely, offering a small smile. "How can I help you?" He handed her the folder, explaining that he needed her assistance coordinating a new project. His voice was calm, controlled, but there was an undercurrent of intrigue. Zoe couldn't tell if it was admiration, scrutiny, or both. As they worked side by side, exchanging details and clarifying schedules, Zoe noticed his subtle attentiveness. Min-jae asked questions, not the usual formal business-type questions, but ones that hinted at interest in her opinions and insights. She was careful not to let her curiosity show, but she found herself drawn to his quiet intensity. At one point, their hands brushed while passing the folder. The moment lingered longer than expected. Zoe's cheeks warmed and she quickly looked away, focusing on her work. Min-jae, however, didn't pull back. There was a pause, a small, silent acknowledgement that something unspoken had passed between them. When the meeting ended, he left as abruptly as he had arrived, leaving Zoe with a flutter she didn't quite understand. She tried to convince herself it was nothing, but deep down she felt that this encounter was more than just a professional obligation. Somehow, in the briefest of interactions, a seed had been planted, a curiosity, a connection, and perhaps the first step toward something neither of them could yet name. Zoe had finished her tasks for the day when she noticed Min-jae still seated at his desk, the glow of the computer screen casting sharp shadows across his face. Most people would have passed him by, assuming he preferred solitude, but Zoe felt a tug of empathy she couldn't ignore. Carrying a cup of coffee, she approached cautiously. "I thought you might need a refill," she said, offering it with a smile. Min-jae looked up, surprised. There was a flicker of something, gratitude, perhaps amusement, before his usual calm expression returned. "Thank you, Zoe," he said quietly, accepting the cup. They fell into easy conversation, discussing projects, deadlines, and then, unexpectedly, life outside the office. Zoe found herself laughing at his dry humor, and in turn, he seemed genuinely interested in her stories about family, friends, and her small, everyday victories. Minutes stretched, but time felt lighter in her presence. Zoe had no idea that her small gesture, coffee for a late-working executive, was leaving a lasting impression. Min-jae, who was accustomed to people flattering him or avoid him entirely, was quietly fascinated by her authenticity. At the end of the conversation, Zoe noticed him tense slightly as she prepared to leave. "Zoe, thank you," he said again, this time with a softness she hadn't heard before. She paused, then instinctively reached out, giving him a reassuring hug. It was brief, just long enough to convey warmth and comfort, but the effect lingered. Zoe pulled back, cheeks warmed, and gave a polite smile. "Anytime," she said lightly, though inside she felt a strange excitement. Min-jae watched her go, silently acknowledging that her kindness was different, genuine, unassuming, and magnetic. That small act of compassion, a simple coffee and a hug, had quietly begun to form a bond that neither of them could ignore. Zoe never expected to see him outside the office, yet there he was, tucked between shelves at her favorite bookstore, scanning titles with that same quiet intensity she remembered. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. "Min-jae," she called softly. He turned, surprised but not displeased. "Zoe. I didn't expect to see you here," he admitted, a small smile tugging at his lips. They wandered through the aisles together, talking about favorite authors and childhood memories, discovering shared tastes that made them laugh. Zoe found herself revealing small stories she hadn't told anyone else, and Min-jae listened intently, asking questions with genuine curiosity rather than idle politeness. As they reached the poetry section, Zoe noticed the first edition of a book she had longed for. Min-jae nodded toward it. "You should get it," he said. "It suits you." Zoe's chest warmed at his words. "Thank you for noticing." When she went to turn the page, Min-jae brushed against her arm. It was accidental, yet deliberate in the way it lingered. Zoe felt a subtle thrill, a connection stronger than any office interaction. Without thinking, she gave him a quick hug, a reflexive gesture of gratitude for his kindness and attention. Min-jae returned it, just long enough to convey warmth and acknowledgement, before stepping back with a composed expression. Walking out of the bookstore together, Zoe realized that their bond was shifting. It was no longer just the brief exchanges at work, it was real, tangible, and quietly exciting. For Min-jae, seeing Zoe outside the office, unpolished, genuine, and wholly herself, was a revelation. She was more than an assistant, more than someone fleeting in his structured life. She was a spark, a rare light he couldn't ignore. And Zoe, feeling the lingering warmth of their hug, understood that this encounter was far from ordinary. A week later, Zoe found herself walking into an art exhibit sponsored by Min-jae's company. She had never imagined an evening like this: soft lighting, canvases stretching across the gallery walls, and the quiet hum of visitors appreciating beauty. Min-jae was already there, waiting near a painting that caught his attention. "Zoe," he greeted, his voice steady but carrying that faint hint of intrigue she had come to recognize. "I'm glad you came." Zoe smiled. "I've never been to anything like this," she admitted. "I'm excited to see what inspires you." As they moved from painting to painting, Min-jae spoke about the pieces with passion, describing colors, technique, and the stories behind each work. Zoe listened intently, asking questions and sharing her own interpretations. For the first time, she saw him outside the controlled environment of the office, a man with depth, curiosity, and subtle humor. When they paused in front of a large abstract canvas, Zoe noticed a flicker of tension in his posture. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He nodded, then hesitated before confessing, "Sometimes I feel pressure to meet expectations, to appear a certain way." Zoe reached out instinctively, giving him a gentle hug. It was brief but grounding, letting him know he didn't have to carry his worries alone. Min-jae closed his eyes for a moment, allowing the comfort to sink in before stepping back with a small smile. Walking through the gallery together, Zoe realized how much she admired his dedication, and Min-jae silently acknowledged the warmth and honesty Zoe brought into his life. Their bond was growing, not through grand gestures, but through these quiet, meaningful moments where trust and understanding began to flourish. That night, both of them left the exhibit knowing something important had begun, something neither could yet put into words, but both felt deeply in their hearts. Zoe had always believed that kindness and honesty could bridge any gap. But when a colleague casually mentioned Min-jae's family ties, her heart sank. "Did you know his family is involved in the Korean Mafia?" the coworker whispered, eyes wide with gossip. Zoe froze, trying to process the words. Everything she knew about Min-jae, his calm demeanor, his subtle charm, his unexpected warmth, suddenly felt complicated. Could someone she admired and trusted be connected to something dangerous? Fear and uncertainty crept in, leaving her restless and unsure. That evening Min-jae noticed the distance in her eyes. "Zoe, is something wrong?" he asked, genuine concern softening his usual composed expression. She hesitated, then spoke cautiously. I heard something about your family. I don't know what to think." He studied her for a moment, then smiled gently. "I can understand your concern. My family has complicated business ties, yes. But that doesn't define me and it doesn't change how I feel about you. I want you in my life because of who you are, not because of what you know or what you do for others." Zoe looked down, her chest tight. His words were steady, reassuring, and she felt a flicker of courage return. Slowly she reached out, giving him a grounding hug. It was brief, but it carried trust, reassurance, and a silent acknowledgement that despite uncertainty their bond mattered. When they pulled back, Zoe's cheeks warmed, but her heart felt lighter. She realized that the connection they shared wasn't about family background or titles, it was about trust, care, and small moments of understanding. For Min-jae this was more than just a hug. It was a promise, a quiet vow that their growing affection could withstand challenges, misunderstandings, and the complexities life might throw their way. It was a quiet Saturday when Zoe returned to the office to retrieve a forgotten file. The cleaning lady from that night she helped months ago was there again, but this time she smiled knowingly as if she had been waiting. "Zoe," the woman began softly, "I think it's time you know the truth." Zoe blinked, confused. "Truth?" The woman revealed her identity. She was Mrs. Kim, Min-jae's mother. She had come in disguise months ago to observe those around her son, to see who possessed honesty, kindness, and integrity. Zoe's act of compassion had impressed her greatly. Zoe's eyes widened. You were the woman I helped?" Mrs. Kim nodded. "Yes. And I wanted you to know that your heart has not gone unnoticed. Min-jae admires these same qualities in you." Before Zoe could respond, Min-jae appeared from the side, calm as ever, but his eyes softened when they met hers. "Zoe," he said quietly, "I knew about your kindness from the beginning. That act, it revealed who you are. I wanted to know you not just for the impression you leave on others, but for the person you truly are." Zoe felt her chest tighten, a mixture of surprise and warmth flooding her. She had never imagined that a simple act of helping someone could lead to this moment. Without thinking, she stepped forward and gave him a heartfelt hug. It was longer this time, a silent exchange of trust, admiration, and connection. Min-jae held her gently, acknowledging the bond that had quietly grown between them. When they pulled back, Zoe smiled, feeling a sense of certainty she hadn't known before. Their story had begun with a small act of kindness, but now it was moving toward something much bigger. Something built on trust, honesty, and hearts willing to understand one another. After the revelation about Mrs. Kim, Zoe and Min-jae's connection deepened in ways neither had expected. Workdays became a little brighter when they shared small moments together, walking to the elevator, exchanging stories over coffee breaks, or laughing quietly over an inside joke only they understood. One sunny afternoon, Min-jae suggested a walk through a nearby park. The crisp air, the soft rustle of leaves, and the distant chatter of children created the perfect escape from the pressures of their daily lives. Zoe found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months, her usual guard melting away in his calm presence. They spoke about their dreams. Zoe shared her desire to one day run a small community center, and Min-jae confessed his wish to support local art initiatives without the weight of family expectations clouding his intentions. There was a quiet admiration in the way they listened, each word strengthening the trust and understanding between them. At a shaded bench, Zoe laughed at a story he told about his childhood in Seoul, and Min-jae laughed along, his eyes crinkling in an expression Zoe had grown to adore. Without thinking, she leaned into him, offering a comforting hug. He wrapped an arm around her, a gentle, grounding gesture that said more than words ever could. They lingered like that for a moment, savoring the simplicity of being together. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic gestures, just the quiet comfort of shared presence. As they stood to leave, Zoe realized that this bond, built on trust, small acts of kindness and heartfelt conversation, had grown into something rare and beautiful. Min-jae's subtle smiles, quiet reassurances, and shared laughter were teaching her that love didn't always arrive in grand explosions. It often began in the smallest, most unexpected moments. Zoe had grown used to the quiet comfort of her connection with Min-jae, but reality had a way of testing even the strongest bonds. Rumors had begun circulating around the office, whispers about her dating the Mafia boss's son. Colleagues' eyes lingered longer than usual, and hushed comments followed her down the hall. At first, Zoe tried to ignore it, but the gossip gnawed at her, planting seeds of doubt. She worried that people would judge Min-jae or herself unfairly, and the thought of disappointing him made her chest tighten. Later that day, Min-jae found her in the break room, where she sat quietly, lost in thought. "Zoe," he said softly, his voice calm but firm. "Ignore them. Your worth isn't measured by what others say. I care about you for who you are, not for the rumors or expectations of anyone else." Zoe looked up, feeling a swell of gratitude and relief. His words reminded her why she trusted him, not just for his kindness but for his unwavering support. Without thinking, she stepped forward and hugged him. It was a long, grounding embrace, a silent reassurance that together they could withstand scrutiny, judgment, and any challenge that life might throw their way. Min-jae held her gently, letting the warmth of the moment speak for what words could not. They didn't need anyone else's approval. What mattered was the trust and care they had built together. As they parted, Zoe realized that facing the world with him at her side made even the most intimidating challenges seem manageable. She could navigate gossip, fear, and uncertainty because their bond was real, steadfast, and rooted in genuine affection. That day, both of them understood something important. Love, trust, and quiet courage could overcome whispers and judgment, and their hearts were strong enough to face it all together. The office had emptied for the evening, leaving only the quiet hum of the city outside. Zoe sat at her desk, organizing papers, when Min-jae appeared, his presence as calm and steady as ever. There was a softness in his eyes that made her heart beat a little faster. "Zoe," he began, his voice quiet but certain, "I've been meaning to tell you something." She looked up, curiosity and warmth mingling in her chest. He stepped closer, offering a small, genuine smile. "From the moment I saw you helping someone with no expectation in return, I admired you. And every day since, I've realized that I want you in my life, completely, for everything we've shared and all the moments yet to come." Zoe felt a flutter she hadn't felt before. "Min-jae," she whispered, unable to find the right words. He extended his hand, then hesitated, finally giving her a tender hug instead. It wasn't just a gesture, it was a promise, a vow of trust, love, and companionship. Zoe held him just as tightly, feeling the warmth and certainty that had grown between them over months of small acts, shared laughter, and quiet understanding. When they finally stepped back, Min-jae spoke again. "Zoe Carter, will you continue this journey with me, together, forever?" Tears of joy welled in her eyes as she nodded, smiling. "Yes, Min-jae. Forever." In that moment, nothing else mattered, neither gossip nor expectations. Their bond, built on kindness, trust, and unwavering support, had blossomed into a love both tender and strong. As they walked out together, side by side, hand in hand, Zoe knew this was just the beginning of their forever.